COS at home. I am your host, Jonathan Viog. Thank you for joining us. We have a great show lined up for you this evening. First, we will be setting the record straight during our 5 for 5 section. Later, we will share some great answers from activists during the Minutemen Mailbag segment. And for the main event, during our interview segment, we are excited to welcome the newest endorser of Convention of States, National Rifle Association board member and Indiana State Representative Craig Haggard. So really great show that we've got planned for you. Now, folks, I usually start the program and I welcome all of the new folks to Convention of States and give you an explanation of our goals and our mission here with Convention of States. I'm going to skip that tonight because we've got a little bit longer 5 for 5 segment for you this evening. And so why don't we go ahead and dive right in with 5 for 5. Thank you, Producer G. So for 5 for 5 tonight, I wanted to take a few minutes to speak with you about a question we often receive from people that are concerned or perhaps have objections to the prospects of holding an Article 5 convention. And that question is, wouldn't a convention put the Second Amendment at risk of being written out of the Constitution entirely? Now, I'm very excited that we will have Rep. Haggard joining us in just a few moments, as I would love to hear how he responds to this concern or objection. But tonight, I want to take the first bite at this apple. First and foremost, I think it's important to point out that most, if not all, of our grassroots supporters and our supporters amongst our endorsers are ardent defenders of the Second Amendment. In addition to Representative Haggard, who, as I mentioned, is a board member of the National Rifle Association, the Convention of States Legal Board of Reference includes Chuck Cooper, who spent most of his career as one of the top attorneys for the NRA. We also have the support of Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, and America's Constitution coach Rick Green, who has partnered with Convention of States over the years to train hundreds of COS activists and staff members about firearms through Patriot Academy's Constitutional Defense Course. Producer G's got some great pictures up there on the screen for you. Furthermore, gun shows have proven to be one of the best places for our activists to bring in new petitions. In fact, if you're going to be in the Knoxville area, and you can check out Gun Owners of America's Goals event that's coming up this weekend, members of our Tennessee team will have a table there for the second year in a row. And earlier this year, we had a great spot at the National Rifle Association's yearly conference that was held in Atlanta, Georgia. So we are out there at gun shows all the time, bringing in new supporters to Convention of States. Now, our CEO, Mark Meckler, has done an excellent job of illustrating how many states support our Second Amendment rights, from constitutional carry laws to allowing citizens to carry firearms while visiting the state capitol. But instead of repeating those facts to you, I want to address the underlying cause for this objection. The notion that we may lose our Second Amendment rights stems from the runaway convention fear. How can we trust a convention to stay on subject is what our opponents typically cry out. They will then go on lamenting the fact that we do not have heroes of our past like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, or any of the other founders that we revere and celebrate, that we name cities after, that we name bridges and tunnels and towns and our capital after all of these American patriots and founders. We don't have them. So how can we trust a convention to not go off the rails because we don't have these incredible icons of American history? However, it's important to remember that the burden of proof rests with a person or people making a claim. So it's our opponents, organizations like Eagle Forum or John Birch Society, that claim a convention could run away or go beyond the stated purpose of the convention. And yet, this has never happened in history. Okay? It's never happened. So the burden of proof is on them to show us how this could happen. And yet, we have all of these conventions that have taken place over the course of our history. In fact, did you know that there have been 42 multi-state conventions over the course of our nation's history? And do you want to know how many of them went beyond the stated purpose of the convention? It's a really, really small number. Zero. Zero of these 42 state conventions went beyond their stated purpose. But our opponents would then counter and say that the 1787 Constitutional Convention was the clearest example of a runaway convention. After all, the purpose of that convention was solely to fix the Articles of Confederation. Okay, so what does the evidence tell us? Well, the Confederation Congress actually had no authority to convene such a convention. Furthermore, the resolution they passed in 1787 about the upcoming convention that was already called for flatly stated that it was their opinion that the convention, again, that had already been called for, should only focus on fixing the Articles of Confederation. Again, just their opinion. What's that saying about opinions? Never mind. Let's keep going. By the way, did you catch what I mentioned earlier? Our opponents lament that we do not have Washington, Franklin, Madison, and others to safeguard a convention, just like they allegedly ignored the instructions from their states and created a new constitution when they were just supposed to revise the Articles of Confederation or something, right? How could you be speaking out of one side of your mouth saying we revere these patriots while on the other side slandering them and saying that it ran away, right? So let's go ahead and let's take our opponents at their word. I guess we should be thankful that Washington and his boys aren't around, since they were the ones who couldn't be trusted, right? Of course, that's completely ridiculous, particularly when you consider that this time in history, at that time in history, when we had that 1787 convention, men would challenge other men to duels to protect their honor, right? See Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr in Hoboken, New Jersey, right? Okay. Are we to believe that George Washington, the father of our country, presided over a convention that ignored the stated purpose for said convention? Really? Does that sound like the George Washington you and I know? The one that we learned about, again, the one that we revere, we named our capital after, we named a state after, we named cities and towns and streets and bridges after George Washington, and he presided over a convention that just said, we're going to ignore the Confederation Congress, we're going to ignore our states and their commissions that they sent us here. Does that sound like him? Taking it a step further, many people believe that the Lord Almighty, God, influenced the men at this convention. Are we to believe that the Lord would have blessed such a deceitful action? While you're pondering all those questions, let me toss out one other fact for you to consider. One of my favorite tactics from our opponents is when they cite former Supreme Court Justice Warren Burger as an authority on Article 5. Yes, the same Chief Justice who joined the majority to create the constitutional right to abortion in a little Supreme Court case known as Roe versus Wade, otherwise known as one of the most egregious examples of judicial overreach in American history, claimed that Article 5 conventions could not be trusted because they could not be contained. Therefore, our opponents conclude Article 5 conventions, can't trust them. Chief Justice Warren Burger, that's our go-to there. Well, okay. By that same logic, since current Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson claims that she could not accurately define a woman, I guess we, the peasants, no longer possess the ability to understand basic biology. After all, since a member of the Supreme Court said it, the claim must be true. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to take the time tonight to share all of this with you because, frankly, our opponents are conning you. They stoke fear in an effort to keep you on the sidelines. The truth, by the way, is available for all who seek it. You can peruse our website, or if you don't want to take our word for it, then I highly recommend the Article 5 Research Center, which has all of the historical information regarding Article 5 available to you, so you can do the research and learn yourself. However, what you will conclude is that you have two choices. You can join with the talkers who just want to go on talking, or you can take action to save our nation using the tool given to us by the framers of our Constitution. I ask that you join us. In fact, tonight, I want to call on the Eagle Forum and the John Birch Society to repent of this dishonest campaign to slander our Constitution and the men who crafted it, and join us in the Article 5 movement. Let's work together as we, the people, to preserve our liberty for posterity. Now it's time for Jake Fay with COS Now.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now!
Convention of States continues to live in big media's head rent-free. A sensationalized Amazon production called Shiny Happy People purports to expose an obscure religious organization called Teen Mania, but it then takes an unexpected twist.
The Convention of States is a way to amend the Constitution without using the normal federal Congress. They want to do it a different way that they are legally allowed to do, and they only need 34 states.
Shred the Bill of Rights, First Amendment, separation of church and state.
COS President Mark Meckler took to the airwaves to respond.
This is an Amazon Prime show that's attacking you guys. It's ostensibly about the Duggar family. But in the process of doing that, they decided, you know what, I think we need to take aim at Mark Meckler and Convention of States. How the heck did that happen?
The show is called Shiny Happy People, which seems to be about neither. In the middle of the show, they cut to Convention of States and how bad Convention of States is. Everything that we're talking about are supported by 2/3 to 3/4 of folks in the United States at a minimum. So there's nothing fringe about it. There's nothing radical about it. It's in the Constitution, and these guys are saying it's going to destroy the Constitution.
Meanwhile, the North Carolina volunteer team recently surpassed 100,000 petition signatures. North Carolina is the 6th team to achieve this impressive milestone. While praising Musk's intentions to limit government spending, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis called on Musk to back a game-changing movement instead.
If you're concerned about the debt, I wouldn't even worry about that, because I don't think just electing a few better people is going to change the trajectory. So you need to do a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and you can do that through the states. You can do it through Article 5. If Elon wanted to weigh in on that and work on those state he would have a monumental impact on doing this. And we also need term limits for members of Congress. And so you can do both of those things.
DeSantis is an official endorser of Convention of States action. Constitutional attorney Mark Levin then posted on X, quote, "I'd encourage Elon Musk to read my book, The Liberty Amendments, and get involved in the Convention of States movements," unquote. On Tuesday, popular podcaster and official COS endorser Ben Shapiro joined the growing chorus.
Well, meanwhile, Elon Musk has been talking about how he wants to start a third party. And there are some who are encouraging him instead to put his money behind a Convention of States, which I think is actually the right idea. Elon has tons of money. A Convention of States essentially would be designed to add constitutional amendments, like, for example, a balanced budget amendment. Like, for an example, a limited government amendment. There are a bunch of things that could be done on a structural level that would actually help and could be done by a Convention of States. That'd be the best use of the money.
And here's U.S. Senator Ron Johnson via an interview on Real America's Voice.
So I'd rather have Elon working with us, recognizing it's tough. And one of the ways to do that is I've always been a big supporter of the Convention of the States, get the states together. And my standpoint, I'd want an amendment to limit government spending to a certain percentage of GDP. I think that would have the greatest impact.
Later during that same show with Eric Bolling, Florida Congressman Byron Donalds spoke out about Article 5 as well.
A third party, I don't think, is the way to go. I think if anything, and I do also agree with Ron Johnson, I think Governor DeSantis also put out that call the other day. Let's be focused on the Article 5 Convention of States. Yeah. And let's actually do things like a constitutional amendment around term limits for members of Congress, because I fully support that. I think it's long overdue.
If that weren't enough, longtime columnist Cal Thomas echoed his support during an interview on C-SPAN.
As long as you put your own political career first and the country second, things are never going to change. That's why I'm a big fan of the Convention of States provided for in the Constitution, where the people call a convention and we get a balanced budget amendment in the Constitution and a lot of other reforms.
And journalist John Solomon of Just the News took to the airwaves to emphasize that calling the first ever Article 5 convention would be a better idea than forming an independent party.
A better option for Elon Musk put his money and his effort behind the convention of the states, the effort by states to call a constitutional convention, and for the first time since the founding of this country, rein in the central government with the power our founding fathers gave us.
What was your favorite news item from this week? Like we said, it has been a wild week, so let us know in the comments section and join me Monday next for the upcoming episode of COS Now.
So much great things in there. Thank you to producer G and Jake for putting those together. Obviously, as you can see, given that Convention of States was shown on this Amazon Prime show, we're over the target, right? Because people are starting to get nervous. They're starting to spread more fear, and it's even going mainstream. And so it's great to see Convention of States out there. And then, of course, again, with the conversation regarding Elon Musk's desire to create another political party, you had Governor DeSantis there. You had many others chiming in and talking about Article 5 in Convention of States. It's exciting. It's really exciting to see it out there percolating. There's one thing I wanted to add. Right now, I want to give a shout out to my Texas team. As all of you know, earlier this year, they were able to remove that expiration date from their resolution, which was a huge, huge victory for us there in Texas, keeping them as one of the 19 states that have passed our resolution. But of course, as Texans, they weren't finished. They wanted to keep going. They wanted to be more involved in things that are going on there in their great state. And so there is a special session that is going on right now in Texas, and they are supporting the effort to ban taxpayer-funded lobbying. That's money that's being spent by local governments on lobbyists that then go and lobby on legislation against the will of the voters. That's not cool. We got to get rid of that. That's something our Texas team has been supporting for a number of years. SB 12 is a bill that's sponsored by Senator Mays Middleton, who's been a supporter of Convention of States over the years. We supported that. It passed out of the Senate. However, it's kind of hanging on by a thread just because all of a sudden many of the Democrats there in the Texas House decided to up and leave their state because they didn't agree with the proposed legislation on redistricting. And so instead of doing their job and serving the people, they decided to get on out of town and go on up to Illinois. An unfortunate situation. Hopefully they'll come back and continue the people's business, and we will continue to work on pushing SB 12 across the finish line. So way to go, Texas team, and thank you for all of your hard work. And now we have the great pleasure of welcoming to the program the newest Convention of States endorser, National Rifle Association board member, and Indiana State Representative Craig Haggard. Representative Haggard, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you for all you're doing.
Thank you. It's great to have you, and we're really excited to be speaking with you this evening. And I prepared some questions for the interview, but before I do get to that, and you probably were just watching our COS Now, and I'd love to get you and give you a chance to weigh in on what Elon Musk was proposing a couple months ago, where he was thinking about having another political party. Do you think this is the best use of Elon's resources to implement the type of change he'd like to see?
I don't, because we've seen this in the past. We've seen other parties try to jump in, and good or bad, those parties, we know that in our lifetimes, it's probably not a viable solution. The quickest and best solution is Convention of States. For those reasons, we're, more than halfway there to what we need. And like you said, with the money and resources, he could probably lobby those states that we need to have those numbers to get to what we need. Because right now we're going off that financial cliff. And I don't think we have time for the viability of a third party. But what we need to do is take effective, quick action through a Convention of the States to stop the destruction of our country through financial ruin.
Absolutely right. So as I've mentioned, you are the newest endorser of Convention of States. And as a first-time guest, I'd like to start by asking you to tell us your COS story. When did you first learn about Convention of States? And why do you believe Article 5 is the tool to solve the problems facing our country?
Well, I've always heard about the Convention of States. And to be quite honest, through my military career, we were very apolitical. I was involved. I would vote. I would watch the national news. And so it wasn't until I became a legislator that we started really talking about policy. It's one of those things, becoming a legislator, you don't really know what you're expecting, and you're expected at some point. Everybody thinks you're an expert on everything, and so you really started to dive in. And when this legislation came about, I'd heard about it. I know what I believed and what I thought it was, and that's when you really start diving in and seeking out those experts to say, "Hey, what is this really about? I know what we need to fix. What's the best way to fix it?" And that's when I really, probably about 5 years ago, started really looking and saying, hey, this is, what is the best answer to the problem? As a matter of fact, one of the most dire problems we have in this country, which is the overspending, the GDP and all that, or the GDP to national debt. And that is convention of states. And so that was kind of when I started becoming more responsible and really trying to understand how we can fix those problems. That's when I started diving into it. And thank God for you all.
Well, thank you, sir. We've been fortunate to have some incredible, amazing state legislators like yourself join us for this program and be in the trenches to help us try and accomplish our goals in all of these states to get to that convention. But I realized that I've rarely asked them what I now want to ask you, which is what led you to a life of public service and seeking a seat in the Indiana House of Representatives? I mean, I think this job can be a bit thankless at times. So what made you pursue it?
So, I mean, to be fair, I never wanted to be one of these guys. I never wanted to be the politician guy. I always said, I'm good behind the scenes. I'll help out at the polls. I'll do this. I'll do that. I'll stay involved. I'll vote. But I don't want to be one of those guys. And that was not really my life's goal. My life's goal was to be a fighter pilot, and everything revolved around that. And I did that for a number of years. After 22 years of service, I went on to work for the NRA prior to being a board member. And I was a field rep for the non-for-profit side, and we did a lot of great things, and they still do a lot of wonderful things people don't hear about a lot on the with the NRA Foundation. I would say what the NRA was originally founded to do, and that was safety and training by actually three, if I remember the story, three Army Guard officers said, hey, we need some consistency, we need training, and we need to do this safely. And that's kind of the catalyst at the beginning of the NRA. And with that, I still felt like I was serving, protecting the Constitution, specifically, obviously, the Second Amendment. And I felt a lot of service there. And when I got out of the NRA and started doing consulting, did some stuff with actually Crane Naval Weapons Research, with some program management stuff and some small businesses of my own, I was happy, and I have a great family, and I felt I had a great life, but I felt an emptiness. I felt like I still wasn't serving. And then I don't know, about 5 years ago during the redistricting, where I live now became an open seat, and I had some folks reach out and ask me to run for this position. And I thought, well, this probably happened for a reason. My kids are grown now. My wife was very supportive. My family was supportive. And I had an eager desire to serve again, to make a difference, to try to make some changes that would last beyond my lifetime and help make things better. And I decided to run, and had, I think, initially 4 people in the primary. And by the end, there were 2 of us, and I won fairly decisively. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Incredible story. Now, you mentioned your military service, and first, thank you very much for your service and the fact that you're continuing to serve the great state of Indiana. But secondly, I was wondering what perspective you might have on the changes that have been implemented by fellow COS endorser, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. Are we seeing an elimination of the political culture that seemed to have run amok under the previous secretaries of defense?
I got to tell you, I am beyond excited that Pete Hegseth is our Secretary of Defense. I am, as a person that started back in 1989 until my retirement in 2013, I saw a massive shift from, as the Secretary talks about, from being a warfighter to these social experiments and everything. I always said toward the end, not everything, but a lot of things that were being implemented that had nothing to do with being a warfighter is everything our enemies would want us to do to make us less effective. And I read the Secretary's book, War on Warriors. I remember reading that and just eating up the book, saying, that's exactly what we should do. That's exactly what we should do. But that'll never happen. I was being a little bit of a pessimist and thought, man, if Pete could be in charge, And then lo and behold, I remember when I heard the announcement of who they were looking at, I couldn't believe it. I mean, be quite honest with you, I think a lot of people were shocked, and I wasn't shocked because of his background or anything else. I think he's a brilliant guy and a war fighter and a true patriot. But I was just so shocked that you never see that, a guy that literally wrote the manual on what I'm going to do if I'm in charge. And he has started to implement those without apology, because at the end of the day, we're war fighters. And that's what we're here for. We're not a social experiment. We're not any other purpose than to be used, break glass in case of emergency. And if they do that, we should be the best, and people should fear us, and maybe fear us enough as a deterrent they don't come after us. And that's what we're getting back to. I think this is not going to change overnight, but already I know with the recruiting numbers being up, with morale being up, I talk to people that are still in the military, and I do see a big change. But I think we have a long way to go, because it's always easy. It seems to be catastrophic or easy to break it, but it takes a while to fix it. But I definitely think we're going down that road, and I really appreciate the Secretary of Defense.
I completely agree with you, and I was equally as surprised, but just kind of surprised, because Pete has been a true supporter of Convention of States, but I know how passionate he has been about getting things right there for our military, and it's just a blessing that we have someone like that now in charge. Now, you also mentioned, and I mentioned your time, the fact that you are a board member of the National Rifle Association, which is one of the most influential advocacy groups in the nation. How did that opportunity come about? I think you had mentioned you'd spent some time there working for the National Rifle Association. And could you tell us also why the Second Amendment is so important to you?
Well, I started working there. The opportunity came about by chance, and that's another long story how that happened. But it was one of those things that when the opportunity, I wasn't seeking that opportunity. Once again, I think a lot of times things are presented to us maybe in a divine way, and we just don't have our eyes open. But I've been maybe lucky, dumb luck to stumble into some great opportunities. And so I started working there as a field representative for the foundation, and we have group events called Friends of NRA events around the country, and we raised money there. We're the Friends programs, 501c3, the foundation's a C4, and we're able to do that and give half that money stays in the state, the rest stays with the NRA, and they do things on the national shooting sports. We do shooting sports. We sponsor things like 4-H shooting, Boy Scout shooting, safety programs, anyway, just on and do some really, really great stuff. And so that's what I started. And I actually, once again, I thought I knew what the NRA was, and I did not know about a lot of these programs. We have great programs with law enforcement, with military and legislative stuff. And anyway, just do a lot of great stuff that is kind of behind the scenes that you don't see. From that, I left the NRA not because we left on great terms. I just wanted to maybe pursue some other things, keep moving up. And I had the opportunity a couple of years ago. We had a lot of stuff going on with the NRA. We knew we needed to change direction. When I say change direction, get back to our core purpose. And I was asked to run for the board, and had that opportunity and was successful. And I tell you, we meet 3 times a year, but between that time, our committees, we meet quite often on Zoom meetings, or sometimes in Fairfax or other places around the country. And it's a lot of work, but it's been fulfilling. I believe we are redefining ourselves. We are on track. We're getting back to the grassroots of what the NRA was meant to be. And the Second Amendment, I know I'm kind of going off track a little bit, but that's one of those amendments, and you've heard that it's a cliche saying, but it's true, that a lot of the others don't matter without the Second Amendment. And I think people sort of forget. I would say you got to look back at the Constitution and look at the context it was written. It was put in there to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government. I know when you say things like that, people freak out and say, oh, you're going to rise up. No, it's just that, you look at history, and some of the first things people did around the world, and if you take Germany and some other places, was, disarm your population. And we believe in legal, safe gun ownership. We want them in the hands of good folks. And I feel safer at night knowing that, we're there. We dedicated Second Amendment supporters to always stand up for what's right in the Constitution. Anyway, that's why the Second Amendment is important to me.
Absolutely. And because it's so important, I think that's also why we see folks that oppose what we're trying to do by calling an Article 5 convention use the Second Amendment as a way to scare people away from it. And shortly before you came on, I addressed that objection, and that, regardless of the stated purpose of a convention, the Second Amendment, in fact, all of the Bill of Rights, is at risk. Now, you are an NRA board member, you're former military. I think you're perhaps more qualified than most, certainly more qualified than me, to address that issue. So when you were reviewing the Article 5 process, why did you ultimately reject this objection?
Well, first of all, I can say from watching what you said before, I wish I could record that and use a lot of your testimony, because it was great. So I would say that you rival me in knowledge of that. I would encourage people to go to the site and actually read that, because I think a lot of people haven't really researched what an Article 5 convention, what you can do with that. And so everything that you said, I'm right on board with that. I also, I think people forget, they think it's going to be run away with the majority of people supporting this are people that hold our same values. When I sometimes will throw up a map and show people, when they show that, even when we've lost presidential elections, if you look across the map, you see the majority of the country red with those little blue areas. And I try to tell them, this isn't a popular vote. It's not an electoral college. This is, a vote. And we have more than enough votes, even if we had a rogue state or two, to ensure that doesn't happen. I know that in the convention, we can, through legislation, say to our people who go, this is what you're required by law to do and not do. So you have that safeguard of the numbers, safeguard of history on our side, and like you said, no precedent. And at the end of the day, here's the thing: the biggest reason for me, now I'm a signer of national term limits also, but the biggest thing for me, I always say our biggest national threat is our debt, is our spending. And here's the reality with that. If we don't stop that, our nation could fall. And if it falls, then none of those other amendments matter. And so, when you look at no plan is ever foolproof. And I tell that to people: you take risk all the time. You make compromises all the time. When you do that, I try to use the military analogy. Say we have two ways to get the objective. This way, you get is through a minefield and you might lose a tremendous amount of your guys. This way is much safer, but you're still going to have casualties. But you still have to make a decision and take a risk based on the outcome of that objective. And the objective here is to get an amendment for a balanced budget so our country does not fail. And to me, that supersedes everything else, all the other worries. Now, I will say this: those of our supporters, our gun supporters, or our Second Amendment NRA supporters that are against this, I understand. I applaud the fact that they are so dedicated to the Second Amendment that anything worries them. And I won't beat them up for that. As a matter of fact, I'm glad we have such ardent supporters. But in this case, I think this is worth, when you look at the positives and negatives, it's worth everything, because we have everything's at stake.
That's so well said. And one thing I would add, and maybe you want to address, I would add, asking some of those NRA supporters or Second Amendment supporters that are concerned about the potential of a runaway convention, I guess I would ask them a question: do you think the Second Amendment is more at risk from a runaway Congress, which is what we have right now, or a potential runaway convention?
Well, I think we've seen examples of the runaway Congress or runaway executive orders, depending on who's in, or runaway agencies trying to make laws by agency rule. We saw that with the arm braces or anyway, anything like that. It's not just arm braces, but EPA, overregulation, where you just using a stroke of a pen, and people are already kind of, to me, doing unconstitutional acts by bypassing Congress to do these things. And then Congress itself, you never know what they're going to do. It's great. I always say a lot of people make decisions that are very short-sighted. You look back to when's the last time we had a balanced budget? It was under Bill Clinton. So I'll applaud Bill Clinton for that, and along with Newt Gingrich. And that sounded great, and everybody was excited and cheered. I'm sure a lot of Convention of States folks were excited. But at the end of the day, it was the last time it happened, because every couple of years, every 4 years, you have to look further to say, hey, we need some guardrails, because we don't know who's going to be in charge a few years later. And so we need those guardrails to ensure that it is there forever. We have a balanced budget amendment in Indiana, and we're one of the top fiscal states in the country. It's one of the best places to bring a business. And we still have our issues. We do, but I do know that we'll never spend more than we have. And that makes me feel fairly secure in being a Hoosier.
So well said. So well said. And speaking of the Hoosier State, next February, Indiana will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of the passage of the Convention of States resolution. They were state number 6 to do so back in 2016. This year, though, Indiana made history by becoming the first state to pass the COS model commissioner selection legislation. You were referencing that before as something that could protect us during a convention. We identify exactly how to select these commissioners and also put into place criminal penalties if they should go rogue and ignore the commissions that they are given by their states. And this was ultimately signed into law by Governor Braun. Unfortunately, I think successes like this are often overlooked, as many people judge COS by the number of states that pass our resolution calling for a convention. So people say, well, that's great that Indiana passed this, and that's great that Texas removed their expiration, but we're still at 19 states, so it's not that big of a deal. I'm wondering, Representative Haggard, would you mind sharing with our audience just how difficult it is to pass legislation in a state legislature, and why victories like what happened in Indiana earlier this year deserve to be celebrated as major accomplishments?
Well, first of all, we could probably do a whole segment on how a bill becomes law, and it's a little more difficult than the Schoolhouse Rock. I wish it were that simple. I actually give lectures to kids on how a bill becomes a law and talk to them about the multiple ways a bill can die before it ever even gets to the floor of the House. And not to go into that long process, but you have to write the bill. It has to be given to a committee. The chairman can decide not to hear it. They can die in committee. It can be pushed on. They can do no votes. It can, in the second reading, it can be killed, or amendments on the third reading. And then when it leaves the House or the Senate, it goes to the other side. And they do the same thing. And now I believe that's good. A lot of people, when you tell them that, oh, that's horrible. No, it's not horrible, because we probably have too many laws as it is. And it's so important, affects so many people for such a long time. It needs to be a difficult process. So at the end of the day, not to go too far into the bill making or the sausage making as they talk about process, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that to get, and it's good stuff. I've had legislation, and all legislators say, hey, this legislation is the best. Mine's the best. And then people start to tear it up and tear it down and add amendments to it. And sometimes it's a great thing. It's like, well, I didn't think about that, or I didn't understand how it affected that group, or that changing these codes changed 20 other codes on the books. And so with that, I think it's amazing that we got this done, because like you said, the concern of a lot of folks, and not just the Second Amendment concern, is that runaway convention. You never know what's going to happen. It could be chaos. And so doing what Indiana did, I think, is very, very important. What I'm hoping is that it addresses those concerns, not only of states that have difficulty passing and that did, but those that maybe that is the reason why they haven't passed it yet. And I think what you tend to see is when people hesitate, when you have the first person to do something, the first person to step across that line, that strengthens the backbone of everybody else. I mean, that's you can put that example to just many things in history where the first person, the first country, the first whoever to do something, you'll start to see those people follow. So what I'd like to see, I'm excited to see if that happens this year, that maybe that's the push they need, because I know that, and I just did it tonight. I passed a bill this year that a group in Wisconsin wants, and so they said, hey, you guys did it. Can we have your legislation? They'll plagiarize. In this case, plagiarizing is good. And we'll use that because you did it. And I look at that now too. And you look at how many states pass something, and that's great. I'll get the best legislation. And to be honest with you, once a state has done it, it is easier because you have a lot of states that don't want to be the first, but once they've done it, they feel like they have a little top cover. And I'm hoping that we're giving top cover to those states that need a reason to step across that line.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, we are using that victory from Indiana to help us in other states, even states that have already passed the resolution. I, as a regional director, have been I've exclusively worked with states that have already passed our resolution, but some of the states don't have commissioner selection legislation or rogue commissioner laws on the books, or perhaps some of the ones that they do could be strengthened. And so in states like Alabama, where they don't have anything, we're able now to say, look, Indiana just addressed this. So yeah, even though Alabama passed our resolution 10 years ago, we can then go to them and say, look, even Indiana, who passed it 9 years ago, still thought it was important enough to get this done now. Even we're at 19 states. Yes, we're not going to be at convention tomorrow, but it's still important to be prepared. Same thing for my state, my home state here in Florida. We've got something on the books. We want to strengthen it. And now we can use Indiana again as an example to say, these states are taking this seriously, and they want to be ready for when the convention comes. So thank you to you and to everyone in Indiana that supported that effort. We really, really appreciate it. Representative Haggard, before we let you go, I do have a great question from someone in our audience. Duty is Ours is their profile name on YouTube. Love that. A nod to John Quincy Adams there. His question is, what would you tell other veterans about why they should get on board with Convention of States? So perhaps veterans that may be on the fence, what would you say to them?
I would say that, I know all veterans take an oath. And I always say that I wish we had more people in the legislature that understood the sacrifice that comes with raising your hand and taking that oath to protect and defend the Constitution. So I think that, and we have great people that serve that aren't veterans, but I think there's something a little different about those of us that have taken that oath that understand what we're fighting for, what the ultimate goal is, and not just to carry out constitutional orders, and that certain things matter above other things. And I would just say that that we can't have success without sacrifice, and this is one of those things you have to look at and say, is the salvage of the greatest nation on earth important enough to take that risk? And to be honest with you, I don't think it is a big risk, but that's my opinion. But for those that do think it's a risk, is it worth it to salvage and save this country? And I think it is. And I think those that raise their hand know that there's a risk with anything, or else they wouldn't have raised their hands, because every person that did knew that there was a possibility of putting their life on the line. In this case, it's just as important as our lives. It's the salvage of this great nation of ours. And so I would just have them, dig deep and look at that and say, hey, I think it is. And I think furthering this for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren is worth that risk. And then because I believe everybody that took that oath, that's why they did it. They wanted to serve, and they wanted to do things to protect our freedoms and liberties for those far beyond our lifespan.
As well said, sir. And I know one of the most popular shirts that we have sold in the Convention of States store is a shirt that says, "My oath never expires." And I know how important that is to our veterans. And so we are grateful for all of their sacrifice. And we ask that you please just continue to serve our country through the Article 5 movement. Representative Haggard, it has been an absolute pleasure getting to know you, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. Thank you for endorsing Convention of States, continuing to serve our nation. And we're actually going to be coming to Indiana for the Race to Freedom Summit coming up in September. I don't know if you're going to be there, but I hope to see you there. You signed up? Excellent. All right. Yeah. I hope to see you there and to give you a hug and thank you for everything that you are doing for our nation and have continued to do. So thank you so much, sir, and God bless you.
Oh, God bless you, and thanks for everything you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, I go back to what I was saying earlier about how our opponents say, you can't trust the Article 5 convention process because we don't have Washington, we don't have Franklin, we don't have Madison. Well, we've got Representative Haggard, we've got Representative Vasut, we've got Representative Eubanks, Representative Riddell, so many incredible patriots that are in our legislatures, whether it be Indiana, North Carolina, Texas, you name it. There are incredible patriots that are here today that are absolutely willing to put it all on the line and preserve the liberty for our country. And I absolutely trust in legislators like that, as well as the people in this country, the grassroots activists that are out there supporting and they are the heartbeat of this movement. And so we may not have Washington, we may not have Franklin, we may not have Madison, but we've got incredible patriots that can get this done. Just really, really enjoyed that conversation, and I hope you did as well. Okay, let's go ahead and move to action at home. Hey, did you know that every Sunday night you can hear directly from Convention of States President and co-founder Mark Meckler? That's right. Every Sunday you can tune in to the Battle Cry to get important updates from Mark himself. In fact, he has a few reasons why you should consider tuning in. Take it away, Mark.
4 reasons why you need to be watching the Battle Cry every Sunday night. Reason number 1 is that I'm going to give you a unique perspective on the news, because I'm not just a talking head, I'm actually involved. I'm a grassroots activist. I work with the politicians. I work with the grassroots. I go to DC. I'm actually doing this stuff, and that gives you a behind the scenes look on what's actually happening in the news. Reason number 2, I'm always on the road. There's a lot going on in Convention of States. And if you want to keep up with what's going on in Convention of States and do it in a quick way every Sunday night, you can do that on the Battle Cry, and you can get it straight from me. Number 3 is we're not just about news, we're really about action. Every Sunday night we give you a call to action. This is something I think you need to do to be politically engaged. Number 4, you get to interact with me, and that's my favorite part anyway, is interacting with you. We have an Ask Mark Anything section. I do mean anything. Fun stuff, political stuff, business stuff, religious stuff, tech stuff. I don't care. Dog stuff. I love to answer all of your questions. Subscribe wherever you do your social media, Rumble, X, Facebook. I don't really care. I use them all. I'll see you on whichever one you use.
So there you have it. And, you know, that was a great hat that Mark was wearing there. For anybody that's listening and is going to write in for the Ask Me Anything segment, you should ask Mark to show you his blue hat that was given to him at one of the Convention of States retreats. I won't say anything more than that, but see if he'd be willing to show you that on the Battle Cry. The Sunday Night Battle Cry can be heard at 8 p.m. Eastern, as Mark said, on all COS social media platforms, so be sure to tune in. Now it's time to check the Minutemen Mailbag. So as we mentioned on previous shows, we have implemented a different approach to the Minutemen Mailbag. Instead of you asking the question, we decided to bring a question to you and share some of your responses on the show. So coming into tonight, the question that we posed to all of you was already what you saw on the COS Now, what's been in the news. Do you support Elon Musk's new third party? Why or why not? And we got some great responses. Producer G is going to bring them up right now. The first response that we got is from Jane Prouty, and she said, yes, I support the party. We need a party for the people, and for somehow getting the deficit paid down, we need people in Congress that believe and support the Constitution. Now, I totally agree with you, Jane, about the need for having people in Congress that support the Constitution. I'm not 100% sure, though, that a third party is the way to go, at least not at this juncture in American history. I do think, though, the way to get exactly what it is that you're talking about is through an Article 5 convention. Next write-in was from Joseph Nettie, and Joseph said the two main parties have made it nearly impossible for third parties to be viable. The idea is noble, but will not work until our entire election system is overhauled. Congress is also ruled by the two-party system. A third party wouldn't get key committee assignments unless they manage to completely take the the base of one of the two big parties. It just won't work under our current system. That's a really insightful take there from Joseph. One I hadn't even thought about, the way that the system is set up in Washington. I do agree with him. I think people that were able to make it into Congress through that third party, which is an uphill battle in and of itself, they would really be marginalized, and I don't know how effective they would be in Congress, because they probably wouldn't be given key committee assignments, and it would be really difficult for them to navigate the system. Not impossible, but it would be rather difficult. So great points there by Joseph. Next answer we got here is from Samson Guthrie III, and he said, I don't support Elon's proposed new political party. Elon can accomplish more by putting his money and energy into supporting the COS to affect the changes we need in Washington. And I tend to agree. I do think that Elon's resources could help us definitely move things forward. And I think Joseph had mentioned too, maybe it'd be better spent his money if he were to kind of take over one of the political parties, kind of like an insurgent in that party, similar to what the current president of the United States may have done in the Republican Party. I think that's definitely something that would be better, but the best option definitely would be Elon getting behind an Article 5 movement to call a convention to address these issues. Another response that we got is from Chuck Connolly. Chuck's from Florida. So, hey there, Chuck. Thinking a third party would be more divisive for our republic at this time. Why not join forces with the large grassroots army of engaged activists at Convention of States? I totally agree with you, Chuck. Our political system right now really is divisive, and having entering a third party into that would probably be even more divisive. Is it possible for us to get even more divisive? I'm not entirely sure, but I think entering that third party definitely, at this point, I'm not saying never, but at this point, I don't think that that is the best way to go, or to affect the type of change that Elon would like to see done here. And I think this is our last response. A third party, and this is from Mary Dean, a third party will do nothing but split the vote. Our country is already fracturing. We need to utilize the Convention of States to fix the government. Our founders knew that eventually those in government would eventually become corrupt. Time to fix it before something worse happens. And again, I agree with Mary. I do think that Convention of States, or the Article 5 movement, that gives us the solution big enough to solve these problems. And I think that it's also an astute observation to suggest that entering another party could split the vote, presumably from the Republican side of the aisle. And right now, most of the politicians that are being put forward by the Republican Party are the pro-liberty candidates. Not exclusively. I'm sure you could probably show me a particular Democrat in a certain state that is more pro-liberty. And some of them, I know we have some Democrats that have supported Convention of States, and states voted with us or are sponsors of our legislation, and we're grateful for that. But at the end of the day, many of the pro-liberty politicians and public servants are on the Republican side. Entering this party would likely split that vote, and we would see a lot of Democrats, unfortunately, which have become the more radical party, folks like Joe Biden and others, those would be the ones that would be getting into power. And we saw what happened not too long ago when they were in charge, and that's a very dangerous thing for our country. So I want to thank again everyone for writing into the mailbag. We're so grateful for your comments, and I love that we've changed this up. You can go to conventionofstates.com/mailbag to answer the question for the next program. I love to hear from you and give you an opportunity to have your voice heard on this program. So thank you so much. Okay, let's move to COS Voices. Speaking of giving you a voice on this program, we've got the COS Voices segment, and tonight we have a great clip from one of our amazing grassroots activists, this one from Oregon, and that's Jackie Burns. Let's listen.
Jackie Burns, Oregon. The Convention of States is a grassroots organization consisting of volunteer citizen activists who come together to write the course of our federal government. We have a 3-part resolution that's being worked in all 50 states. The first one is to rein in the scope, power, and jurisdiction of the federal government Yay. Number 2 is to impose fiscal restraints, not only spending but taxing as well. And 3 is to impose term limits. And we're talking not only Congress and the federal judiciary, but also the unelected bureaucrats, the swamp. As Dr. Tom Coburn had said, this country doesn't have to fail. We can cheat history. We need your help. Please join us. Go to conventionofstates.com, sign the petition, and join us.
So well said there, Jackie. Thank you so much. And, she pointed out there the runaway bureaucracy. And I think I talked about the runaway Congress, but I think that runaway bureaucracy is exactly the kind of thing that needs to be defeated. And that, I think, is a greater threat to our Bill of Rights, whether it's the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, you name it. We need to address this. And the best way to do that is from outside of Washington, D.C., through the Article 5 process. So thank you so much, Jackie. Thank you to all of our supporters and everything that you're doing on the ground, our activists in these states. You dedicate so much of your time, treasure, talent to Convention of States, and we're so grateful for each and every one of you. Folks, just a reminder that all of the COS at Home programs are aired live on the first Wednesday of every month at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Our next show will be on Wednesday, September 3rd at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. And my guest will be former United States Senator and current Convention of States Senior Advisor, Senator Rick Santorum. Really looking forward to having Senator Santorum back on the program. It's been a while, so I'm looking forward to talking with him. And as I mentioned, we've got a summit coming up called the Race to Freedom Summit that's going to be taking place in Indianapolis, Indiana. So I think we'll be talking to him about that and so much more. You're not going to want to miss it. So join us again, Wednesday, September 3rd at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, this has been a ton of fun for me. I love being on this program and talking with all of you in our supporter base. I hope that you've enjoyed the show and that it was helpful to you. Thanks again to Representative Haggard for joining us tonight. We're so grateful to have him as our newest endorser for Convention of States. And if you're going to be at the Race to Freedom Summit, be sure to say hello to him in Indianapolis next month. A big thanks, as always, to the legend Producer G for all of his hard work behind the scenes and having to put up with me. The man deserves a Presidential Medal of Freedom just for that alone. And the greatest thanks goes to all of you for all of your continued support of the Convention of States Article 5 movement. It's important to remember, folks, we talk about all of these issues and the problems that are facing our country, and at times it can feel daunting. But we need to remember that despite all of these problems that our country currently faces, you and I, we the people, are the solution. So I want to thank you again. Have a great night. God bless you. And I look forward to seeing you back here in September. God bless.